The purpose of today's recording is to explain to the construction industry how they can apply Elint to manage health and safety on site. And the specific scenario we're going to look at is how would a principal contractor benefit from using the software? The contractor you see in front of you, IPC, is a live site that we're going to go through, and they are managing multiple contractors building a 3-story residential building. They are the principal contractor. There's an agent who looks after the specifications set out by the client, and we have used the specifications to actually open the site and manage the site accordingly. So the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to create a company profile. Once you've created the company profile, you're going to create your sites. So you will see they already have a second site. That means that one project where they build this Kwanshu head office, they have a second site which they're now building on this RF1663. Elin doesn't care what you call your projects, as long as you understand that normally a Elint site is a geographical site where you work specifically doing construction work specifically on one specific site. So for every project you work, you're going to have to open an Elint site. And we will not charge you if the Elint site is already closed. So if your project is closed, we will not charge you a license fee for that, for the duration of the contract that we have with you. We will only charge you a small fee to store the data so that you can come back to it if you need to. So you only pay for an active Elint site. So it's an active project at that point in time that you will pay for. So you can have multiple sites within your company profile. You don't have to have a BU or a business unit. However, if it is a big construction company and you have different legs looking at different projects, you might want to add those different departments as BUs into your scope of things, but it's not required. So once you have a company profile and you have your project site open, then you're going to capture your contacts. So everybody that's going to work on site, so you might have specific people doing your checklists, for instance, on site. You might have administrators, you might have, your safety officers on site. They all need access to the site. So you will see Yaku has got 2 sites under him. So we obviously linked him to both sites that's open for this specific company. But Christelle has only got 1 site, so she's only working on one specific site. But please remember, as soon as you open a site under a company, you need to link your contacts to that site. Even your own name. So if, like for instance, this is me, I had to link the site to my own name to work under my name on this company profile. So every time you add a site, make sure your own contact details is linked to that site. So you give permission to yourself to a specific site that you've opened, as well as everybody else that's going to work on that site. Or you add a new user to the site if it's applicable. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the check activity templates. And this is your risk assessment. So you do not have to use the risk assessment module in Elint. It is a standalone module, and if you don't want to use it, we switch it off. You don't pay for it, and you can do your risk assessment on your Excel spreadsheet or your Word document and just upload it as a Word document. It is not compulsory to use the Elint risk assessment at this stage. There are benefits of using it, but for the ease of this video, I'm just quickly going to go through the way we would use it if we do use it. So this specific company used this template. So we imported this template for them so that they can use it in the front end. So once you've created your risk assessment, then you can go into the front end. Just on the principal contractor risk assessment, you might have the same risk assessment for the different projects you're working on because you work with the different risks. So once you've built in a template into Elint, it's there to be used multiple times if you want to use it again. So if we go into the risk assessment, I'm in the wrong site. So if we go into the risk assessment, I've just rated one of the risks to show you how it works. So I've just literally taken one element out of that risk assessment template just to show you how it works. Now, the risk assessment is now populated in Elint so everybody can see it. And if you need to PDF it and send it to the contractors, you can PDF it here. And if you want to see how the risk assessment actually works, please follow the tutorials on the risk assessment and you will see it. The one thing that I do want to show you is the specifics in this risk assessment that will tie up with what we do in the rest of the document. So your agent or client will give you the specifications, and in the specifications they will say you need to do a risk assessment, and they will also give you a risk assessment. So if you've done your risk assessment here, you've actually done one of the things that they've asked you. But there's quite a few things that they also ask you in the specifications, which would be in line with what your risk assessment picks up. So in the specifications, they're going to say, if you use plant and equipment, you need to have a checklist to monitor the condition of the plant and equipment. So here you can see we've identified that in our risk assessment as well. So your risk assessment becomes a record that you have looked at these things and you've considered them and you've put controls in place, and the rest of your recommendations would actually be your controls. Just make sure when you do identify controls that you actually do implement it in the system. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to go into CMS, and then from our CMS we're going to import a management measure that I've created to read in line with what the contract specifications are. So the contract specifications from the agent says that we need a 372 agreement, we need a plan, we need a risk assessment, we need a method statement, we need appointments to be done. So I've listed everything that they wanted from us as part of my CSVs. If I upload the CSVs, just want to show you, you can actually see who's it assigned to, when it needs to be done, etc., etc. If I upload the CSVs, it will populate the CSVs here. I'm not going to upload it now because this site is already open and active. But this is actually creating your whole file. This section is creating your whole file. So we can provide the CSV for you. We can also provide just the template. You can take your specifications from your agent that you receive and you just upload it in a bulk upload so that you have those specifications as CMSs. The reason why we do that, and let me just explain to you what the CMS does. So here it says I need a 372 agreement, for instance. Now it says with the contractor. So they've signed a 372 agreement, but they also have 372 agreements with their contractors. So what we do is we say, we know you're going to come onto site. We want this agreement signed, and it's an annual thing. So if this project runs over 12 months, say for instance it's going to run 18 months, then we know we're going to have to review this 372 agreement. Or I can say this 372 agreement is for 2 years. I can change that. Also, if you look at this, we've got induction. Their induction would be a once-off because all the people come on site at one stage, and then you do the induction with them and it's done. So the CMS helps us to track our own file, what's required for our own file under the specifications, but also what's required for our contractors. So we do our contract management, so you can see that's a specific contractor that I want specific elements from him to do before he comes onto site, because this is pre-construction. So the CMSs is vitally important to make sure that you track everything that a contractor must give you from his health and safety file perspective, but also must do to ensure that the records is up to date, which would be their specific checklists and all of that. So what we have done is, once we have the management measures, so let's just go back to our own file. So we have access control, for instance, and we say we need to upload something every month. So you will notice that my CSV that I initially wanted to import, this project started late, so we didn't use this CMS. But normally what we'll do is we'll load this first and then start building the file as and when the CMSs comes up. So the CMSs might come up, most of them might come up only once, and they will come up within a day or two from each other to make sure that we actually build it systematically. So once we have the file built, we'll load it into Elint documents. So you can see that's the health and safety file. So the CMSs that we created in the front talks about the health and safety plan. There's my health and safety plan. It talked about the baseline risk assessment. There's the baseline risk assessment. Remember, I said to you, you have two options with the risk assessment. You can either use the risk assessment in Elint, or you can just upload your risk assessment that you are comfortable with. Whatever, doesn't matter as long as the risk assessment is applicable to the actual project. Your legal documentation, if we go in there, what we have done is we've got client-specific documentation, that's their specifications. I have uploaded here the COID construction regulations and the OSH Act, so that's also available in the file. And then we have the different appointments that we've done and the notification for construction work and all of that. So you set up your whole file and you load it within Elint in any of index that you feel comfortable with, as long as the documents are there. The next thing, the reason why we do this before we move on, is because on your app that your user will use, they will be able to open these documents. So we have been audited numerous times on sites, and this specific client have been audited a week ago by the Department of Labor. We don't have a printed copy of anything on site. They've audited the files online through the Elint app on our phones. They've done a full audit on our phones, and we could immediately send them the emails which they required to as proof of documentation. So you do not have to print any of these files if you use Elint. I also have confirmation from the Department of Labor saying that the health and safety file on a construction site must be on site irrespective of the format, and it needs to be authenticated. Now, if you look at the way that Elint works, there's a manual signature on every checklist, so it's authentic, as well as it's document controlled in documents, so nobody can just willy-nilly upload anything. And then it's available through an app on site, or the platform you can show them on a computer as well. So you don't have to print files anymore. You upload your file here, all your information that's required for your site. And then if there's anything that needs to be reviewed, so your risk assessment, your agent might say they want you to review your risk assessment on a monthly basis to make sure it's still valid, or 6 monthly. So you're going to create a CMS for that risk assessment. So that is the initial CMS that I showed you that you upload through your CSV will be things like that. So if we go in here, we just filter it further. Revisions. They want us to revise the plan on an annual basis. They want a monitoring report on a monthly basis, and they want the risk assessment on an annual basis to be reviewed. Now, this might change. That might change if there's conditions that change on site, or if the agent comes on site and they say, no, they want it to be reviewed monthly. You can change it to say monthly. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to your file. So here's your file in whatever content you want to, or context you want to file it. All the documentation is there. It's available for audits. It's available on site electronically through the app and through your platform in any format you want to show them. Please do not print the file. It's not necessary. Okay, then obviously you've got contractors working for you. So you will have a contractor that's going to work for you. The first thing you're going to ask them is, please provide me your contract information. So they will send their specific file to you and you upload all their documentation. So you can see this is their file. We don't have to have a manual file anymore. This is the file that they've sent us, and we just uploaded their documentation. Now, some of their documentation might expire, or we want to see if they're actually doing their registers. So for that, we created CMSs again. And again, for your contract management, you can populate a CSV and just upload the CSV and change the contractor name. So you'll see I've set contract management, and then I said that's Dukes. So this is what I want to track for Dukes. I want them to sign that 372 agreement. I want their induction and their PPE to be signed off. These guys are going to be on site for 6 weeks. So I'm not going to check their PPE and induction again. Once off would be sufficient. I want the letter of good standing. So I know their letter of good standing expires in April next year. The reason I've put it in is because if for some reason Dukes come back onto site next year and we're still busy over that period of time, I know that I need to follow up the 372, the letter of good standing, because that's going to expire. It's a document that I want to keep track of. If they are not coming back on site, then obviously I don't have to worry about it. Liability insurance. Their liability insurance expires next year. So again, we'll track it. They might not be on site, and then we'll just close it off. We don't have to worry about it. But if they might be on site for whatever reason, I do want a new insurance. Their medicals, it's February next year again. They might not be on site, but if they are on site, I want to make sure that they are medically fit. Then you can see it says here, weekly registers upload pictures of contractors. So what we do is we created a checklist for this. So we say in your health and safety file as Dukes, you have specific equipment that you're going to use. You have toolbox talks that you're going to use or do, and you've got DSTIs, which you are doing. So on a weekly basis, so you're doing it on a daily basis, but every week, and we schedule this for every Friday, we want to see if you've actually done it for the week. So we are not waiting for the safety officer to come to site and verify if the file is up to date. The safety officer comes on site to verify the physical conditions, because the system is tracking to see if they're actually doing their work. So all the administrator is doing is they're going to go to checklists. Here's the weekly contractor verification. I just want to make sure. No, it's not picking up the name. Let's just go back to that checklist. Just want to open it and see what it says. I know you can't see it. That was DE's checklist. So this was Duke's checklist. So here they've actually completed Duke's checklist for the week, and they've taken pictures of all the registers to make sure that those registers have been completed correctly. If Christelle picks up that they haven't done, say for instance, a DSTI, out of the checklist, she will raise a task and say there's a failure because Duke didn't run or didn't do the DSTI. So ultimately, what the safety officer will do is they will look at the tasks, they will look at CMSs. The CMSs will say what's outstanding. The tasks will say if there's any issues that we need to address with the contractor. If they come on site, and then they can address it with the contractor, or Christelle just follows it up with them and say, why haven't you done it? So you keep track of your contractors very closely while they're working on site. You can actually do this daily as well. You can ask them to do it daily. And if they use Elint, they can use a daily checklist which they complete, and you can have access to it. But we're focusing on how the principal contractor manages their contractors. If a contractor had an incident where somebody got injured or property damage was caused, then a continual improvement will be raised. So the IPC staff will raise a continual improvement. There will be an investigation. It will all go through continual improvement at the end of the day to make sure that everything is tracked and controlled. You will also see if a CMS fails, then obviously it raises a continual improvement as well. And that needs to be investigated. Why wasn't a toolbox done on the 9th of the 10th? So just to go back to a CMS, go back to the way we manage contractors. The principal contractor knows that next week he's going to appoint a new contractor. He lets the administrator know this contractor is going to work on site. The first thing we do is we create a file. So I've opened a folder for that new contractor. The second thing is we're going to go up and say that contractor, these specifics that contractor needs to do. Things like, I want the 37.2 agreement, I want a plan, I want a risk assessment, I want him to do a method statement, I want him to give me the appointments. So I'm going to go through the list and say, this is specifications, what's applicable to that contractor and what's not. If it's not applicable, I take it out of my system, out of my CSV, and I save it. I'm not going to do the saving now because I haven't received the detail of the contractor yet. Once I save it, it populates what I need for that contractor, and then it starts tracking the compliance against that specific contractor. Once I receive the contractor's information, I'll start uploading the folder or the file for them and mark off wherever I have that specific contractor. I will mark off what I have received and how we progress on that specific contract. And then once we've done that, the monitoring of the weekly checklist will come in. Just under checklist, if you have loaded all your checklists in the system, this is specific to IPC, that this is what they use, their own first aid box, fire extinguisher, hand tools, generator. This belongs to IPC. So IPC is using the system to track their own compliance when completing checklists. But what we have done for the contractors is we have said, okay, the contractors are going to give us weekly information. So we want to know on a weekly basis, have they done ladder inspections, tool inspections, portable electrical grinders, any applicable register. We want to see their DSTIs and we want to see their toolbox stock register. And we take pictures of it. So we take a photograph of it so that we can have the record of that specific inspection or register in Elint. And if there's anything wrong, then obviously what we'll do is we'll raise a task out of it so we can discuss it with that contractor and track their performance over a period of time. You will also see what we have done for this specific site. We have an access control checklist as well. So we're not using Elint at the actual entry to the site. The security guard has just got a book and an indemnity form, and whoever comes on site will either fill in the register or the indemnity, and at the end of the week we'll just check who was on site and take those pictures as well so that we have the records in Elint. So the only manual document this IPC has on site is actually that register and indemnity form. That's the only manual documents they use. Their contractors uses manual documents in the sense of completing registers and all of that. But IPC complete their own registers in their own checklists using the Elint platform. If we go to tasks, you will see we have assigned tasks to different contractors, so you can actually track the performance of the contractors to see how well are they performing. And if we go to dashboards, IPC, you can pull the dashboards and you can see what is the compliance. So you can see D and E are partially compliant in one thing, but Dukes are fully compliant according to our CMSs that we have done. Then also if we look at tasks, some tasks that we have raised for Dukes and D&E, you will see there's a few that they need to address. And those tasks are things that we either wait for or we're concerned about, or it's things that that might be, like for instance, we have a task for Dukes on PPE. They haven't received their bibs yet. So we know that they're working on site without bibs, for instance. So that would be how you pull it through and check the compliance against your own system as the principal contractor, which we have automated the principal contractor file, but also how do they manage their contractors. And we have automated the management of their contractors in Elint. We also do, if I go back to checklists, we also do our contract management site inspections. So you can see Sias, the safety officer, he uses Elint to do the actual inspections on site, and he just raises the tasks out of his inspection if he needs to raise anything. And then once we receive the contractor's file, you can see I audit their files before they are allowed on site. So we also use Elint so that we know what we've missed. So all the tasks that you actually saw on the dashboards was raised out of those audits, saying we need the following information on your file. And as they bring us the information, we close off the tasks and we load them into their folders to make sure that we've got the information of their files on site. So we have their files electronically on site, but we also allow them to work with a manual file on site because we don't enforce the use of Elint by every contractor working for IPC. But IPC's contract is automated through their CMS, their checklist, and their documentation. The whole file sits on Elint here. If there's an incident, it goes through continual improvement, and then anything that needs to be addressed that doesn't need an investigation goes through task. If we have anything under CMS that's not linked to a checklist, then the user will have to come back to the actual, I think it's under this file, to the actual file and say, I have done it. So you can see there's the monitoring report that's done, and I have done the monitoring report in yesterday and uploaded manually into the system, so we've got the report. And that is how we do use Elint for the principal contractor, to make sure everybody that's on site is actually focusing on health and safety, and the files are not just used as a tick box exercise to get it done and over, and half of the file is not there, it's missing, or it's rained and it's wet and filthy and dirty. We've got everything electronically and it's available through the app on the site. And as I've said, we have been audited. Department of Labour have accepted the way Elint works. If you have any information that you need, if you want to discuss the way we use Elint, please give us a call. We also provide health and safety files, templates, everything that's needed to make sure that your file is actually up and running, and that you do comply with the legislation.